What's your biggest real estate mistake?
Biggest real mistake. So I had to think about this one a lot. I've done a lot of investing up and down the Front Range and Summit County and Steamboat. So I've invested all over the place, and I definitely have done some things good, and I've definitely done some things not so good. Kind of a tale of two properties, and I'm going to use Summit County as my example here. So I bought a number of properties in Summit County. Matt, you've helped me with a number of those, so
Yes,
thank you very much. You've done a great job. But one of them, I did too much speculation on it, right? So I think a lot of times when you're buying in any resort community, like prices are high, and if you're leveraging, getting too much mortgage, like if you're really intending on cash flowing a property, if that's like one of your goals, that can be challenging right out of the gate. And so with this particular property, I had too big of a mortgage for what that property could actually generate as far as revenues. And since it wasn't necessarily a property that I was using for personal use, it was purely investment. When the cash flow numbers didn't start to make sense, it didn't have a lot of great use for me at that point. It was just a negative cash flowing property. Now, on the flip side, I had another property that the cash flow was better, but I also had a lot of personal use for it too. So it was a very valuable property to me, even though it maybe sometimes the cash flow good, sometimes not so good. So, but I think the biggest mistake was I didn't have a really good contingency plan for the first property that I just talked about. That I had too much leverage on it. The cash flow numbers didn't make sense. And then when it had no personal value for me, it just didn't make sense to hold on to it. So I ended up selling it for a little bit of a loss. So that was in stark contrast of my other Summit County property, which I still own, as you know, out there in over there by the Snake River arm. Is still have that property. And sure, I've had it for a long time. And sure, like during 2008, the value of it went down, but it had a lot of value for me back then. I was still using it personally, and it still cash flowed okay. And so at the end of the day, it didn't matter that the value went down, because then, of course, it went back up and many, back up and then back up again. So at the end of the day, it didn't matter that that property went down in value, because I had a good contingency usage for it. It made sense. When it wasn't cash flowing well, I had a contingency plan to handle it. And so I was never really put in a position where I was forced to sell. I think you don't want to ever put yourself in a position where you're forced to sell, because that's when you can sell and lose money. If you're like the other property, I was never forced to sell it. I didn't want to sell it because I was using it personally, and the cash flow was okay enough. I could make it work. And so I was never forced to sell it. So I was able to ride out that dip. And so I think you want to set yourself up so you can ride out a hard time, because you never know when a hard time's going to come. You never know when a 9/11 is going to happen. You never know when a COVID is going to happen. You just don't know these things. And so if you are set up where you can ride out a hard time, then I think you're going to set yourself up well. And I did not do that on the first property.
No, that is an excellent point, and it's something you can't predict so much. So